Everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com with another video about programming in the programming language Dart. So now we're going to be getting into functions. Here's where we're going to start seeing some of the more significant syntax differences, even though they're still not huge, but here's where you start seeing much more diversion between the different programming languages in the way they handle functions and in the way they're going to handle classes in the next video. Okay. So what's a function? A function is really just, think about it as a cluster of code that you're going to want to be able to reuse over and over again. So let's say I like to print, so let's say instead of print, get out of the way, printing imagine that this is a very long string. Okay. Now that'd be annoying to have to type that up over and over and over and over again. So what I can do is I can create a function. Okay, and the way it works is I would just give a name to my function. So we'll try this out. So we'll say my long string. And generally when you name your variables and function names, you should be using camel case. Just again, convention makes it easier for other people to read. So my long string. So the first word is lowercase, but then every other word is uppercase. So but instead of putting like an equal sign, like I'm creating a variable, you're going to put a parentheses. This stands for the parameters that your function may take. This, which gives whoever uses the function the ability to put information inside of it. I'm not going to give any parameters to this particular function, so it's just an empty set of parentheses. And then in the brackets is what the function does, which we will say is print the string. Okay, so there's my function. And notice I described it outside of the void, out of the main function, because I'm not giving the instruction to do this now. So generally, convention is you do it either like above or below your main function in compiled languages. Only things you're actually telling it to do are in the main function. So in this case, I am going to tell it to use the function now by calling the function my long string, and then you always have to put, even if the function doesn't take parameters, you still got to put the empty parentheses, so that way it knows that you're calling the function. If you don't put the parentheses, then it thinks that you're treating the function as a variable. So basically you're saying this function here, not run this function here, but there's a function here. So if I were to print my long string without the parentheses, it's going to print like, oh, there's a function here. So that's not very useful. Or at least not useful for what we're trying to do now. And I can do that over and over again. So instead of me having to type in that line of code over and over again, I can just keep running this function. Even though it's supposed to be my long string, so that'll error because there is no my long strong function. So let's fix that. Okay, that's how code gets broken. So let's see if that all runs fine. And there you go. See, I'm just using that function. It allows me to do something over and over again, especially when you're talking about longer, complicated things like generating random numbers or doing some sort of really long calculation. This can save you a lot of time. Okay, but what if I wanted, like, let's say I'm doing a calculation, right? Let's say I want to add two numbers. Okay, so we'll say we'll call this add to num. I'm going to want two parameters, so we're going to have parameter 1 and parameter 2. We'll just call it A and B. Again, name your stuff more semantically than that. This is just an example. So what that means is that whenever you call this function, you can put up to two parameters in it, separated by a comma. For the purposes of understanding what the function does, we're going to treat whatever the first parameter is put in as the variable A, and whatever the second parameter is as variable B. So when this function runs, it's going to, and then I want to get that value because I want to do something with it. So the function gives you nothing back unless you ask it to. So that's what the return is. Okay, so I need to return that value. And generally, once a function returns a value, it's done. So be careful where you put your return command, because the minute it returns something, the function ends. So I could put all sorts of code after return, it won't execute it because it's already returned a value. So I'm going to return A plus B. So whatever A plus B is, that's what it's going to return. Okay, so now what I can do is I can print, and I want to print the result of add to num to the numbers 5 and 5. Okay. So what I'm saying is I'm using the print function, and what I'm passing as a parameter to the print function is another function that's going to add two numbers and give me back the result, which is what I'm going to print. Okay. So there's a lot going on in that one line of code. So here's where it starts getting a lot of fun. Okay. Now if I run that, it should just print 10, 5 plus 5. Okay. And that's pretty much how functions work. Now, a big thing that's been added to a lot of programming languages of recently is the idea of what's called an anonymous function. This is the idea of a function that you don't have to necessarily name. Sometimes also referred to as a Lambda function. Okay, so let's try. In JavaScript, they're called arrow functions, and here I think they're structured pretty much the same way. So let's give it a shot. So basically, you have parentheses that represents the parameters, but here what I have to do for Dart, which is different, is I have to declare what the value is going to return. So I want to return an int. I don't think I have to put a name, but we'll see what happens. So int, and then I have to put the arrow, which is this thing right here. So that way, and that's what tells it, okay, this is what you're doing. Okay, so actually, yeah, I'm going to do a, b, a plus b. Okay, that's what I wanted to do. And then I think, let's try this out. 5, 5, does that work? I don't think that's going to work. No. Okay, so like the Lambda function basically works a little bit differently than it does in Python and JavaScript here. So the syntax is right, but the way we got to use it's going to be a little bit different. So basically the way it works is it's another way to write a function, and the way you would work is you would put the type of return value int, and we'll call this add2, so that way it's a different name than the other function. And the way this would work is, again, I put the parameters there, and then I put the arrow. But the difference here is you're not making it too long. Like it's literally like you're making a one-line function. So generally this is good if you're making a really small function. So something like, okay, actually no, I want the A and B. Okay, and then A plus B, semicolon. So same thing, but I'm going to put it up there, and then I can call it from right here, add 2, 5, 5. Semicolon. Okay, so now instead of running this function, so see how this one, is a little bit longer to write. Okay, this was just like a one-line function. Let that load for a second. There we go. So let's see if that works. And it prints 10. So that's all a Lambda function is in Dart. Basically, it's just another syntax for writing a function, especially if you're only doing like a very single expression function, where it's just basically doing one thing, like in this case, adding two numbers. This can be a much more quick and concise way of writing your function versus this, which is probably better for like longer, more complicated functions. But the same idea is this: you name it, and again, the only difference is with the Lambda, I have to actually specify what type of value is being returned. So in this case, an integer, it could be a string, whatever. I need to tell it. Well, here I don't have to because it'll figure it out based on what I return. Okay, so because I want to make an explicit return command. Well, here I'm not. Cool. So that's functions in Dart. You can literally create functions to do whatever you can imagine as you learn more and more tools. So I'll leave it at that. I'll see you guys in the next video.